Hey future fifth graders. So in the interest of time, because this one is kind of an intensive problem, so to save a little time, I went ahead and already filled in what do we know, what do we need to know. If you haven't done it yet and you're following along, you can pause the video and go ahead and jot that down just so you have the same thing in front of you. So we'll go ahead and dive right into it. Part 1 says the league wants to place 9 players on each team. Leftover players will be added to teams, so some teams will have 10 players. How many teams will have 9 players in each region of the state? How many teams will have 10 players in each region of the state? Statewide, how many teams have 9 players and how many teams have 10 players? Explain your reasoning. So, we're going to go ahead and get started by dividing this whole number here into groups of 9. So you already know the operation we're going to use is division first, because we're taking this total and this total and this total and we're dividing each of them by 9. So we'll start with Eastern North Carolina, and I probably will not be able to fit all my work in here, but we're going to try. So 9 goes into 3 0 times. 9 goes into 32 3 times. 9 goes into 57 6 times. 9 goes into 37 4 times. And that's with a remainder of 1. So when you first look at it, you think, ooh, 364 teams, and one more team has 10 players. But what you actually have to do is subtract one of these. This remainder, you have to actually go back and subtract it. So, because this tells you how many whole groups you can make, right? Well, now we have to add this one back. So we no longer have 364 groups of just 9. We have in Eastern North Carolina, and we'll show the work even though I know you can do that in your head. Eastern North Carolina has 363 teams with 9 players. Shoot, I just tried to write the same thing again. And one team with 10 players. Because what we did when we did this subtraction is we took out one group of 9. So even though we only subtracted 1, we took out a whole group of 9. And then we added this one back to it. Does that make sense? I know it's kind of confusing. So for Western North Carolina, we need to do the same type of setup. Nine goes into 2 0 times. 9 goes into 29 3 times. 9 goes to 28 3 times. And 9 goes into 11 twice. No. I don't know why I said twice. It's because I was already subtracting. It goes in once. Oh my gosh. Look at that. This is what happens when you try and do math too late at night. So, you have in Western North Carolina 300. And what do we need to do here? We need to subtract that remainder because then now we need to take out 2 full groups of 9. So 331 minus 2. So we will have 329 teams with 9 players. And we will have 2 with 10 players. Okay, and then our last one for the regions. I'm actually going to do it here at the bottom. 9 goes into 1 0 times. 9 goes into 15 once. 9 goes into 61. Oops, page is falling off there. And there is no remainder. You don't need to write that out, but just so that we have it with the rest of our work, I went ahead and did it. So for the Piedmont region, we have 168 teams with 9 players. So let's go back up. Did we figure out how many teams of 9 in each region? Yes, we did. Did we figure out how many teams of 10 in each region? Yes, we did. Now it says how many teams of 10 in the state and how many teams of 9 in the state. So to figure out how many total teams in the state have 9 players, we need to do a quick addition. Just double checking my math there. Okay. Sometimes it's hard to catch your own mistakes. And then there are 3 teams that have 10 players. And we better just go ahead and label it in the state. In the state. Whew, that was a lot of work for part 1. On to part 2. Okay, let's tackle part 2. So same thing, I already went ahead and filled in the top part of my chart here. So what do we know? Same as before, the only difference is now there are 7 players on a team. And then what do we need to know? Same as before, except this time we're looking at 7 players and 8 players. And again, it's by region and then again by state. So let's look at Eastern North Carolina first. And this time we are dividing by 7. Seven goes into 3 0 times. 7 goes into 32 4 times. 7 goes into 47 6 times. And 7 goes into 57 8 times. Remainder of 1. Again, we have to subtract. Remember that subtracts the whole group of 7. So that means we have 467. East North Carolina has 467 teams with 7 players. And the way you can check your work, so if you're thinking, that doesn't make any sense. How do we get that many players if I only subtracted 1? Well, go back and double check your work. So let's do 467 times 7. 7 times 7 is 49. 7 times 6 is 42, plus 4 is 46. 7 times 4 is 28, plus 4 is 32. Well, I have... Oh, that is right. Oh, I got worried there for a minute. I forgot we were doing 7 and 8. I was thinking 10 again, and I thought, oh, that doesn't work. So now we add one group of 8 back. So how do we do? Did it work out? It did. So that's how you can determine if your answer is reasonable or not. If you're not sure, if you're thinking, that doesn't look right to me, go back and double check your work. So we are good to go here. So I'm going to pull a check mark so we know we already checked that off. Let's go work on Western North Carolina. Seven goes into 2 0 times. 7 goes into 29 4 times. 7 goes into 18 twice. And 7 goes into 41 5 times. And it's a remainder of 6. So again, we subtract. So in West North Carolina, there are 419 teams with 7 players, and there are 6 teams with 8 players. And our reasoning for that is we divided this into groups of 7. We determined how many people were left. Then we took those groups out of this number, out of this total, out of this quotient here, and we made those into teams of 8 to accommodate those stragglers, as I like to call them. If you want to, again, we can go back and check our work. So 419 times 7, 7 times 9 is 63. 7 times 1 is 1, of course, plus 6 is 13, and then 29. So we're not quite there. We need to add 6 times 8, should give you 48, and we'll add that in. 11, 8. Did they match? We are good. And I think I can just squeeze Piedmont in here. Well, that was silly. I shouldn't have put it that close. 7 goes into 1 0 times. 7 goes into 15 twice. Goodness. 7 goes into 11 once. And 7 goes into 42 6 times. And just because it's late and it's important to check your work. Do everything check out? We're good there too. So we have answered this part of the question. Now we need to figure out how many teams in the whole state have 7 players. So we need to do, oops, we'll do my work over here. This is that is the end of part 2. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. Otherwise, go ahead and get started on the 3rd task card. See you next week.